This is me going to the Capitol to interview some state representatives on the school funding issue.
You bet.
Thank you. What are the biggest challenges facing Texas school in terms of funding right now?
Let me ask you a question before. Can I let it all hang out here and say what I really think, or are we
Please do.
advertising this a little bit for a school project?
No, this is the real deal. Say what you have to say.
Okay, good. All right, let's go. Ask me again.
What are the biggest challenges facing Texas schools in terms of funding right now?
The biggest challenges facing Texas schools in terms of funding is moving from being 44th in the nation in the state effort to fund public education up toward being number one, so that we have the best schools in the country instead of schools that are rated much lower. And the challenge is that we cannot get the Republican majority here, who have controlled the legislature for 22 years and control the governor's office for 30 years, to join with us in trying to make a meaningful effort to improve our public school system. Instead, they come up with schemes like vouchers,
Yes.
which takes money away from the public schools.
Can you explain the school vouchers?
Yes, the governor has proposed a scheme to spend $1 billion giving money to people that want to send their kids to private school, not public school. And it is the way it's written, they would get as much as $10,000. And even people who have plenty of money and whose kids are already in private school would get $10,000 per student to keep them in, or put them in private school or keep them in private school. The problem is that the way we fund our public school system is that average daily attendance controls how much funding a school gets. So when you pull children out of public school and put them in private school, or pull them out of public school and they start being homeschooled, the school population declines and the amount of money the local school district gets declines. But they still have to hire teachers and still have to pay for buildings, so their costs don't go down.
Yeah. How can people help overcome these challenges as a community?
Political activity is the only way to overcome any of this. You've got to be active in political campaigns, supporting candidates that advocate public school education. We have 5.5 million kids in public school. We have 500,000 kids that are homeschooled, and I think we have about 350,000 kids going to private school. 5.5 million they're the ones that need the help. And that's the only way we're going to be able to protect our future, is to do a good job of educating everybody, not worrying about a handful of them over here that want to go to private school.
Yes. What should Texas students and families know about the future of education funding in the state?
Well, they should first know the recent history, is that this Republican majority in the House and Senate in 2011 cut $5 billion out of the public education budget. Then they began to add it back, so that by 2019 they were getting close to having it all put back. And today you'll hear them boasting about that great session in 2019 where they spent all that money. All they were doing was replacing the money they'd cut only a few years earlier. Now we're in 2025, and to keep up with inflation since 2019, it will require another $1,340 increase in the basic amount of money that we give on a per student basis to local districts. They're proposing only to give $220 of an increase in that basic amount. The basic amount is called the basic allotment. And if you're not even willing to keep up with inflation, you're not serious about public education. And that's what our big fight is about right now.
How have you communicated this information to the parents?
we have town meetings. We are on social media. We do press conferences, hoping the traditional media will pick it up and write about it. And accept speaking invitations and go wherever we can so we can talk about it.
Critics of school vouchers argue that they take false funding away from public schools. Where do you stand in this situation?
They do take funding away from public schools. And the question would be, if they're not even willing to keep up with inflation and the allocation of money for public schools, where are they finding $1 billion to give away in this voucher program? And they say, oh, we're not taking it from public schools. If you have $1 billion available for education, it ought to be committed to bringing us up to the level necessary to at least keep up with inflation since 2019. Here's another figure. Because when they say public education, they're also referring to charter schools. Well, charter schools are not governed by the local school board. They're separate. They're authorized by the Commissioner of Education. If you take the money that's just been given to public schools, in the last 12 years, there has been zero increase in state funding for public schools. I'm talking about independent school districts, not charters and not anything else. So we're way, way behind. We heard testimony last night in the Education Committee that third graders in Texas, we heard testimony last night in the Education Committee that 46% of third graders in Texas are not reading at a third grade level. Why is that? Well, when you're 44th in the nation in your state effort for public education, obviously you're not doing a good enough job to educate our young people so that they're reading at grade level.
What evidence do you have to support that?
The evidence would be that the cause and effect assessment. Let's just take Fairfax County, Virginia public schools in Northern Virginia, for example. Their kids are reading, their third graders, 88% of their third graders are reading at a third grade level. Now, this is a multicultural, multi-ethnic population in Fairfax County, Virginia. They spend $20,000 total per student there. In Texas, we spend a total of $15,000 per student. Now, that number is not just in the classroom. That number pays for the buildings and all the other things, all the infrastructure. So the $5,000 difference is what makes us 44th in the nation. Now, stop and think about this. Sometimes when you're talking about budgetary matters, the problem is that you don't have enough money. Texas in 2023 had a $30 billion surplus of money. And this year our surplus is over $20 billion. Plus we have a rainy day fund of about $50 billion, I think is what it is now. We have plenty of money. If you look at what is the cost of living Texas from 44th in the nation in support for public education to 25th, just being in the middle of the 50 states, it takes $30 billion. That means that the entire surplus is not due to careful management of the government, it's due to consistent underfunding of public education relative to what all the other states do.
How will rural communities be affected by school vouchers?
Rural communities will be affected negatively by school vouchers, just like urban areas will, although in a unique way. There are no private schools in most rural areas. So they'll be faced with helping to carry the economic burden of paying for vouchers, but they don't have any private schools where any of them could use vouchers. That's the principal way that they'll be negatively affected. The other way they'd be negatively affected is that the bill pays $2,000 per family to homeschoolers. So somebody who might have been thinking about leaving the public school system and homeschooling realizes they're going to get a check for $2,000 for each child. There's going to be some people leave the public schools in rural areas in order to homeschool now. And the idea that nobody will ever have a private school in a rural area, I think is wrong. I think you're going to see some of these fundamentalist churches start a school and tell all the families, you better have your kid in our church school here or else they won't go to heaven. And then they'll collect $10,000 for every student that comes over to their school.
Do you think the $220 increase as allotted by House Bill 2 is enough to meet the rising cost of education?
No, that refers to that basic allotment I was talking about earlier. The Republicans have proposed increasing the basic allotment, which is $6,160, by $220, when we all know that just to keep up with inflation since 2019, it has to be increased by $1,340. So it's not enough.
What additional steps should be taken because of that?
Say again.
What additional steps should be taken?
Well, the most important step we should take is to fully fund public education in Texas. We ought to set a goal of being 25th in the nation at the very least in the next few years, and start right now taking available funding and putting it into public education. We ought to abandon the idea of vouchers entirely, and we ought to make charter schools comply with all the same rules that our public schools have to comply with. You know, public schools have to take everybody, have to deal with all of the challenges that we have in society, and these other schools don't have to do that.
Texas has seen teacher shortages in recent years. What measures are being taken to increase teacher pay and retain quality educators?
The Republicans are talking a good game, but we're way below the national average in teacher pay. We ought to immediately increase every teacher's salary by $15,000 a year. Just start there. No conditions, no incentives, nothing like that. Just bump the base pay up by $15,000 for everybody, and then start from there. We are seeing, we are losing teachers. We have a huge percentage of our teachers that are not certified now. They're called uncertified teachers. They come in and get some type of provisional certification. We've got low morale among our teachers. Polls indicate a high percentage think about leaving the profession. So we need to immediately invest in education professionals, not only teachers, but librarians and people that make our schools run.
How does the current budget proposal address the students who require extra academic or mental health support?
Better ask me that again, see?
How does the current budget proposal address the students who require extra academic or mental health support?
Well, if you're talking about special education, in the last, 2 years ago, we learned that our school districts are spending $2 billion more than they're receiving for special education, which is a real hit to their budgets. So we ought to immediately put another $2 billion into the special education allocation, and then assess what more is needed. Because we know just to pay for what's going on right now, it's going to take another $2 billion.
Is there anything else I need to know about this? About the whole subject in general?
That's pretty much you've covered all the most important questions. What people need to know is that if you don't change the people in charge, you're not going to change what happens. And they need to get active in politics and go into the polls and elect people that are committed to a real first-class public school system.
Thank you for your time.
All right, good job.
Thank you, sir.